Well, first of all, thank you everybody for joining. I'm Jacob Gonzalez with WGI. I'm a vice president of client solutions. I've been at the firm for 7 years. Been working in the industry for over 27 years on large programs. I've done over 500 projects worldwide and dedicated my first 11 years really in working in the Texas Medical Center for a world-class program. Just to give you some context, Texas Medical Center has over 60,000 parking spaces. If you actually line up those spaces front to back, it's over 200 miles of parking further than Houston to Austin. So it's a very complex parking program, and had the opportunity to learn a lot during my first 11 years dedicated to that program, and working primarily in the prime project management role as well as developing and enhancing the entire parking ecosystem for the medical center, which has a lot to do with what we're going to talk about today. So really, during that journey, I've become a specialist in implementing new technology like the pay on foot system back in 1997, event parking and prepaid scanners, LPR, 4D scheduling, automated vehicle systems, parking guidance system, and now we'll talk about EVC today. Really, the foundation of what we built our program on is a very simple approach, and it's really something that I built my philosophy on, and that's really the buck stops here. And about 3 to 4 years into my career, I had the president of my firm call me and say, Jacob, we have a new project that we're going to work on. It's a prime project. You're going to lead it. And really, we're focused on client experience. And at the end of the day, it doesn't matter it doesn't matter where the issue lies when it comes to your consultants, your sub-consultants. At the end of the day, the responsibility lies on you. And are you ready for that responsibility? Well, lo and behold, that's exactly when Rich, 3 years ago, when Rich became the program manager for one of the programs that we're going to talk about today, that's the same question I asked him. And we built that philosophy. And the point of it is really the fact that when you have that approach and that mentality, the entire way you look at problem solving and integrating solutions changes, because it doesn't really matter. You're looking at the end result. You're looking at being very proactive and very collaborative, and that's what we focus on when we develop these programs. And so, Rich, he has 30 years of experience. He is a planner, very experienced, which is very important. Again, these programs take 30 plus people, team members, to develop, to maintain, and to execute. And Rich is the program manager for the EV program that we will be talking about today. We'll get into some details, but we got to be very careful because it's a confidential client and we've got to respect our NDA with them. But at the same time, we do want to bring the value to you as the audience, and we really want you to answer questions as they come, ask questions as they come up, send it in through the chat, and both Dan and myself and Rich will be monitoring them. We may answer them right away or at the end of that slide, or we may defer to the end, but we do want you to ask the questions so we get them and we collaborate with you, because this entire program is designed for it to be as interactive as possible, get the questions and tailor the responses specific to you. So that's something we want to focus on today. Again, my role on the program we'll be talking about is program director. So my focus overall was on the big picture, helping organize and standardize our design approach, as well as enhance the communication with our stakeholders and optimize the overall role that we play with it throughout the project lifecycle. Again, we want to seek to understand, so we ask very critical questions and want to take the information we learn on one program and apply it to another, and try to create as much systems as we can in the chaos that occurs with all the thousands of things that are moving at one time. So enough about introductions. Let's dive in and talk a little bit about the overall, what is EV? So, a lot of federal dollars have been given incentives for the growth of EVs, electric vehicles across the country. And while we've seen a huge increase of EVs the last few years, ironically, the percentage of vehicles on the road is still between 1% and 2%. Right now, at the end of 2023, it was a little bit over 1%. I think it's around 1.8% now of all vehicles on the road. So while we think that there's a huge growth of EV and it takes up a lot of the energy for our design approaches, it still is got a long ways to go to become more prevalent within our designs. I'm not saying that there's not concentrated areas, but what I am saying is that it's a lot less than we realize. So again, why are we talking about EVs in our fleet? Well, because a lot of organizations have strived to become net zero by 2030. And because of that, if they're operating huge fleets, that's a big part of reducing the energy usage and the gas usage and that sort of thing to become net zero. And because of that, this ambitious goal requires them to look at implementing an EV fleet. So that's what we're talking about today for the most part. So let's dig in. Any questions come through so far? I don't see anything. So transitioning to EV, really the first thing as an owner of a campus, of a single parking facility, you really need to understand what the operational impact is going to be to your facility or to your campus or to your overall program. So really retrofitting existing facilities is much more than meets the eye when you first look at it. You've got to think about a lot of things. How you're going to keep your business running while you transition and wrap up this new program, how you're going to assess the existing facilities that you have. You want to define what specific challenges and opportunities that you have with your specific campus. And during the assessment process, you may want to ask yourself some critical questions like, what is my budget? What am I starting with? Is there grant dollars available for this program that I'm looking at doing? Which sites are optimal for EV and where on the site? Because that's critical to know as well, because the electricity comes in specific parts of your site, and aligning that is very important. You have the rights to make these modifications. Sometimes you're leasing a site, and that lease comes with some requirements that you've got to get permission from the owner or the landlord to make these modifications, to even put EV on the site. So we've run into that situation before. Again, do I have a site investigation report? Where do we stand with understanding the rules and regulations that the local AHJ apply to this specific site? Do I have record drawings? Do I have them electronically? Are there environmental issues on the site? These are all the things that you want to think about when you're starting to assess, is EV right for you and does it make sense? Are you planning enough in advance? What is the timeline it's going to take for us to get EV implemented, and does it fit within my criteria? Are there power upgrades required? These EV chargers take a lot of energy. They pull a lot of energy, and you'll be surprised how much it's going to take, and that's going to potentially require a power upgrade. And if that power upgrade needs to happen, and you need to coordinate with the local utility, what other initiatives am I working on and I should be considering before I make this upgrade? Because I know that may be coming 3, 4, 5 years down the road, and I need to take that into consideration. So that process needs to happen and take place. And then again, understanding your procurement process. How am I going to procure the design team? How am I going to procure the contractor? And then again, how will this be financed? That's a very important question. And don't forget about standardization. A lot of times where you're doing, try to answer all these questions, put all these things together, and some folks lose sight of standardization. Hopefully you have standards in place, and we'll talk a little bit about that more in the preceding slides. But the point is you always want to standardize the things you're doing so that you can optimize your processes on the owner side as well as the process on the design side and construction side. So to do that, we want to talk about defining your program needs, and also the review process of the engineers and the approval process that you're going to implement as you move forward into design for planning. And finally, you want to take advantage of prototypes. Prototypes are very important. We want to take advantage when you have a national program. Prototypes can help us optimize and drive down costs, both soft costs and hard costs. So that's very important to have. And then identifying all your low-hanging fruit and what you want to implement first, second, third, fourth. And then last but not least is you want to define and set realistic goals. It's important to do that, and that takes some collaboration with your design team as well as your construction and CM. You want to set those goals through your collaborative process when you do the programming, which we'll talk about in a minute. All right, developing your EV program. Rich, you want to jump in?
Thank you, Jacob. Yes. So you want to develop an EV program internally for yourself. Where do you start? First, you need to identify an internal PM, somebody preferably that has program management background, working with multiple disciplines. It has a full understanding of the life cycle of the project from designing to actually construction and implementation in the field. You're going to want to look to see if you have the technical folks on your staff that have an electrical engineering background and civil background. When it comes to understanding the full needs of what needs to be done design wise to get these projects and these EV chargers in the ground. You also want to identify your team, somebody that has a power background, working with local utilities to negotiate and get the equipment and the actual power that you need to the site to energize the EV chargers that you're going to need for your vehicles or your fleet. And then you're going to need a review and approval team, somebody or staff that you at least have to review the plans that you're developing for your sites with consistency, and you have a set goal of what you want to see the designers do for you and how the plans look themselves before they get submitted from building department. In this process, you need to identify gaps. Surely there are some gaps. You're not going to actually have electrical engineers on staff or civil, where you might have to go to external partners, somebody that you want to team up with for these services so you don't have to hire them yourself. Also, you're going to want to have the ability to manage internally and keep track on all of the disciplines that you need to run this type of review and service. One of the things you can do is leverage existing partners, consultants, contractors, CMs, your legal assistant, utilities or AHJs or municipalities that you currently are working with your facilities across the United States. Or there's also an opportunity to build new partners or opportunities to work with somebody else that maybe you wanted to work with. When you're looking to actually establish your program, you're going to need to develop the life cycle of the actual implementation of the EV chargers on the sites. You need to develop a scope of work. What you want to see from the design itself, what you want to implement, what type of chargers, what are your expectations, which sites. The next thing you want to identify is what sites, what sites do you want to implement these EV chargers at? Where's the best location where you think you'll get the most support from local municipalities and jurisdictions to implement your EV chargers? Phasing is very important when it comes to installing EV chargers on the site. Depending on the availability of power to your facilities, you may want to incrementally add these EV chargers to your property. You may want to just add the equipment that's necessary to provide EV chargers, and then as the power becomes available in your area, have the ability to phase into sections of blocks of 20, 30 to 100 EV chargers on a site. One of the things that you want to do when you're considering this implementation and phasing is the equipment itself. A lot of times, the equipment that's required for EV chargers is a long lead time. So you need to understand the amount of time that it takes to actually get this equipment to the site before you can implement the installation of it. This is assisted by identifying this early in a project and phasing the project itself based on the availability of the products. And then close out. You're going to want to be able to have the ability to understand that everything that was needed to be installed for the safety for dealing with electricity in site is done in place and properly approved and signed off by the managing authorities, especially with the utility for these EV chargers.
So, Rich, I think the closeout is a very important process because one of the things that we like to do is we like to, and we'll talk about it in a second, but the assessment of a post-mortem meeting where we actually talk about what went well and where there's opportunities for improvement, and then re-injecting that information into the scope. If there needs to be a scope adjustment, if there needs to be an adjustment with some of the meetings that we're having internally, we talked about that just to really make sure we're getting that information back into the system, because again, we're talking about anywhere from 20 to 30 projects being developed and run simultaneously with a team of 30 to 50 people across the country that are working on projects simultaneously. So there's a lot of team members that you have to make sure are in sync. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in a minute, but I just want to emphasize, when you're developing your EV program, if you're looking at a national program at this scale, there's going to be a lot of meetings that we're going to be attending, and the meetings are going to have very specific goals and very specific impact to your overall schedule. So you really want to make sure that that's all the cadence for these meetings, the cadence for how things are happening are all lined up and in sync, because that's very important. And that's something that Rich does. Part of his role is to make sure that the meetings are happening, make sure that the right people are at the meetings and the systems are happening appropriately. And then when issues come up that he runs into, he'll escalate to me and say, "Hey, Jacob, I need your help here on this particular item. This is something that's not just specific to this project. It is more, it's at a higher level for the overall EV program and potentially the other programs that we may be managing for a client. We're doing 7, 8 other programs, and anytime there's an opportunity to bring value and inject that value into the processes, Rich gets me involved, and then we get in, we huddle, and then we then go to the proper channels to make sure that happens.
It's considerable coordination.
Yeah. But getting into the segue of managing a national program. And again, Rich and I are going to tag team on this. I'll lead this conversation, but again, I want him to be able to tag in on anything that may be something valuable to the team that we want to share. Again, the first step is really defining the core teams. A lot of times what we're doing, once you as an owner, if you're an owner and you're developing your team and you break it up into regions, we want to mirror that same makeup on our side, because we want to, in order for us to optimize our communication and enhance that client experience that we're trying to provide to you, we want to mirror that makeup. So a lot of times what we do is we'll have conversations with the client to discuss how are you going to manage your team, and how your team is going to be assigned projects across the nation. And then we'll take that information and we'll develop our team makeup. And in this particular example, we were breaking it into West Coast, East Coast teams. We had 2 core teams. Those core teams were able to mirror the client in this particular program, and then they were able to also QA/QC each other's items so that we could make sure that we're also learning from each other and also helping each other increase the QA/QC within the process, which Rich will talk about in a minute. The other thing that we do as regional teams, we develop and optimize the report out for the regional lead. So each regional lead has to report out to the client, and then that regional client will also report out to their individual project manager. So that's something that we want to make sure is mirrored as well. And then we leverage our local partners. So a lot of times what we as the program managers, we have, like I said, a ton of team members involved, and some of our clients are implementing diversity supplier programs. And when they implement a diversity supplier program, we have to hit a goal, say 25%, 30%, 35%. We want to make sure that we always use the best team for the job. So then we take an assessment of our team and say, okay, our team overlays with the client's team this way, and there may be a gap in, say, the Midwest. So and if there's a gap in the Midwest, then we look for specific diversity partners and suppliers that we can partner with, bring to the table, hit our goal, as well as maximize the value that we're bringing to our clients. So there's a lot of strategy that goes into that.
When you identify these partners, you have to, there's a bit of training in itself, make sure that they coincide with what the program requires. But once that's in place, it's streamless after that point, but it's something that's important. You got to find somebody that works well with your company and understands the needs of the program itself. But coordination is key when it comes to this type of partnership in understanding of what the deliverables are expected.
Yeah, good point. And also the redundancy you have to build in your system. You want to make sure when somebody goes on vacation. So 2 weeks ago, Rich went on vacation and I had to step in and cover for him. And then last week I went on vacation, so he's stepping in and covering for me. And you've got to do that not just with each other, but with your teams. So your engineers, your planners, your construction managers, those folks that are doing construction administration, I should say, they have to have backups for them. And so we have to build redundancy in the system and always be having that communication about who's going to be out, where they're going, who's going to cover when they're out. So we have these regular meetings that we'll talk about in a second, but that's super important to build the redundancy in the system. Also, we want to enhance QA/QC by our team members creating and performing in a repetitive manner. So there's a lot of things that we do. Is, for instance, we received feedback from a client where we wanted to make sure that our site visits are done by the same people. We're looking at the same thing, and we want the site visits for our electrical and our civil to be the same folks because they're going to be out there, they're going to put their eyes on it, and they're going to be able to see and do that assessment in a repetitive manner and look for the things that they're learning as they're executing other projects. So that's very important for us to do. And we've seen some gains in that when we first implemented that, and it helped us get ahead of the game very quickly with that repetition. It does take us a little bit more time to get out to some sites across the country. However, in the end, that investment in doing that speeds up the overall design process. So that's something that can be very important and valuable.
Where that's key is when you're dealing with as-built for a site, it's on paper, it's not always what's actually in the field. There's been plenty of times where you're at a situation where you're designing something and then comes up that there's only 5 parking spots where the plan shows 6. This is pretty common. So site visits and double checking as-built key to actual implementation, especially when you have a key number of EV chargers that you need this site. The last thing you want to have is be in the middle of construction and find out you're short 10 chargers when you need these vehicles. So it's key to upfront coordination, making sure what's actually built in the field is what's existing on site today.
Yep. The next point to make is really you want to be creative. That it's important to be creative when you're putting solutions together and developing the program and trying to get responses and develop the solutions as quickly as possible. And one of the things that we always encourage is really cross-pollination. So when I say cross-pollination, I mean when we find a solution in a specific market, like for instance, the one that comes to mind is automated valet systems that were developed for the casino industry. And when we were designing casinos, this is very prevalent because it's very important for their client experience to be maximized, and they wanted to be able to get these vehicles parked, picked up, and back to the people as quickly as possible. So they're the ones that were pushing and developing this innovative solution for their market. And we turned around and we developed those solutions for them. We understand how those solutions work. We understand how the technology worked. And we saw an opportunity in the healthcare market, and we turned around and said, okay, this particular facility, the Texas Medical Center, we need to apply what we learned over here because it fits appropriate to that situation. So a lot of times I'm constantly trying to encourage our designers, hey, we've got to think about how we cross-pollinate our design and our solutions and optimize the approach that we have for our program. So we see that working a lot, and it's exciting when that particular thing happens. The next thing when on the creative side is we really want to take advantage of mock-ups to confirm. And so there's certain cases where we design it, it's in theory, it's engineered, it's in a computer and it's showing us the way it works. But sometimes we gotta create a full-size live mock-up of that particular situation so that we can replicate it. And in this particular story that we were designing a facility for Texas Children's Hospital, and that facility uh, depended upon the operations of the valet system. So we knew that everything worked, and the vehicles would get into the valet and get out of the valet into the garage. But our biggest concern there was, would it back up into the street and block the intersection of the street? And that was a big concern. So what we decided to do is we decided to create a mock-up. We surveyed and laid the entire design out into a parking lot at the Lions Stadium, actually, because that was the only parking lot big enough to lay it out. And during that process, we were confirming that the valet team that they were using to operate that facility could get those vehicles off that platform fast enough. And sure enough, we had to make some tweaks for the valet to make sure that they can get the vehicles off fast enough. And we also, in the process, identified some columns that were really blocking the lines of sight. And to transfer a column out and to move it cost millions of dollars. But you would not have done that if you didn't experience the mock-up. So I think one of the things that we always encourage, if you get in a situation where there's some doubt and uncertainty, you want to consider using a mock-up. In another case, we use a mock-up to enhance the communication with the client for a pay-on-foot system. During that mock-up process, we actually determined that, hey, we're meeting ADA requirements, and because we're meeting ADA requirements, this is too low. To reach down and grab something for someone at 6 foot and above it's not as convenient. So we end up having to raise, we put 1 pound-foot at ground level, and then we raised 1 6 inches up. So everywhere we had 2 of them, that's the way we had to do it. So mock-ups can be very valuable and powerful tools to use when you're developing solutions. The next item is really leveraging pilot programs. So there's opportunities whenever we're coming up with a solution or we need to develop a solution. We want to do it as part of an existing project. So in this particular story, we actually were designing a parking lot in New York, and in that location, it had some methane contamination, and because of that, it was going to require an above ground EV solution for all of our conduit runs. So we asked the client, hey, this is an opportunity for us to go ahead and do a pilot program and develop 2 or 3 options for above ground solutions. And they agreed, and we were able to develop those designs, and that pilot program was added value to the overall development of the EV program in that case. Again, creating modular designs, we want to again replicate and make sure we're as efficient as possible. And even though we base our prototypes and modular designs, we want to make sure we set limits to them too. Like, we don't want to force fit every single standard and design into a particular solution, because not one solution will not fit all. And so we've always got to be asking ourselves, if we apply the modular design and all the standards that we've developed on this program, are we still saving money, or is there a better way to do it to go faster and cheaper? And so we want to make sure we set limits on when we start seeing things not fit right with the standard, that we jump on that and say, hey, this is going to be a special case where we cannot apply the standard in these prototypes to this particular case, and this is why. And so we've got to be able to define that very quickly, present that to the owner, make sure they have buy-in, and then we have the opportunity and the permission to do this in a custom design, because the whole point of having standards, prototypes, and modular designs is for us to simplify the operations and make sure we're driving down the operational costs and also the maintenance costs. So that's something important also to implement. Also, we want to think about what client supplied equipment you're going to provide. One of the things that we run into on one of our programs is that the client was supplying the equipment, and when we got into the construction side, the contractor was asking for submittals, and the submittals we didn't have because the client was supplying that information. So there was a little learning curve that we had to have there when that when that situation popped itself up. And so we want to make sure that if you're ever supplying equipment yourself on your side and not getting it through the contractor, that we clarify that information between the owner and the contractor. Because a lot of times we're not in that interaction. That's between the contractor and the owner, and that needs to happen. So we'll be able to bring that up when those opportunities arise, but we still depend on that communication to happen between A and C. And then also, Rich, I don't know if you want to talk about developing the BOM.
Yes, the development of bill materials is key. And one of the things that we identified up front is that sooner better. Given the amount of lead time, a lot of this technical equipment, the supply chain itself, it's better to establish your bill of materials up front. Obviously, if there are revisions on the way, you need to update that and it has to be communicated down the line. But at a certain point, you need to get some of this equipment that you know is not going to change ordered. And the sooner that you have this bill of materials set and established, you can have your purchasing team, if you're self-purchasing or your contractor that you're selecting, source it out. If you have a certain deadline or a timeline that you want to meet, you're going to have that in the pipeline in advance, or you're not going to achieve your goals.
Thanks, Rich. I think the last thing when we're asking to be creative, really think about the sync between the project manager and the construction manager or the contractor and the onboarding of that process. There is a lot of things that are happening in a EV program that are being developed toward the end. And a lot of times the contractors want to get information before drawings are completed. And we got to make sure we're giving them the warning and the heads up that we're still finishing the utility UDP, and that scope needs to be clearly identified, what's being provided by the utility and what's being provided by the owner. So while you can get some information and some pricing done, you've got to make sure that those drawings are finalized and to the contractor so they get the pricing right. And so that goes back to scheduling and understanding the critical path and working backwards. And I think that's where having a project manager on the owner side that is looking at that and managing that is super important. Depending on the procurement method, whether it's design bid build, or CMR, all that tweaks a little bit. But the point is that you really want to understand that. And so being proactive in that part, in that transition and ahead of time can help you get ahead and also avoid a lot of headaches. The next section, protocols at each level. Again, as a program director, it's my job to make sure that we're taking good practices from one program to the other. And that's really what I'm always mining for. So when I'm in meetings, when I'm talking to our team, I'm always looking for opportunities to do that. And it's really my primary role. And when things get escalated, that's when I step in. And then Rich, as a program manager and project manager on projects, he wants to make sure he's always extracting valuable information from the team and applying it to the overall program that he's responsible for. But at the same time, like I said before, he's looking for opportunities that might add value to other programs that we're working on within our organization or within our team. Next, seek and optimize. I think this is one of the critical items for continuous improvement of a program. Again, setting regular meetings with the client, PM is something that I do, and we want to meet on a weekly basis, especially when you're launching a new program. When you're launching a new program, everybody is trying to find their way. Everybody on the owner side, everyone on our side, we're trying to find the best way to optimize, to keep the schedule as fast as possible, and also making sure we inject as much quality as possible. So setting regular meetings with them is super important, and discussing how we can get any grit out of the system needs to be done proactively and collaboratively with them. So that's important. And this set program optimization meetings. So one of the things that we like to do on the design side is we set these optimization meetings up, and usually they're done as soon as we finish the first project in a new program. We set up that meeting. We sit down with the entire design team and we ask them a very simple question. Each designer, civil, hey, what hiccups are you saying what challenges are you seeing, and what can we do to make your life easier and speed up, add quality, and increase efficiency. And we go around the table and we talk about that with each individual. They give us that feedback, we dialogue, and then I take that information and I go back to the client project manager and we have a conversation of the things that impact him that he can adjust on his side as well. And then they give us feedback and we take it back to our team. So that process is an iterative process, and it's something that happens usually at the first major project's completed. And after that, we normally do it on a quarterly basis. And we'll do that. I usually fly to Tampa. Well, most of the team that's in Tampa will sit down on that program for EV and we'll work that out. And also, we want to strike a balance with the development of the standards. A lot of times, collaborating with the design team is great, but sometimes the standards change on a regular basis. So when the owner is developing those standards, we want to make sure we get a heads up. Hey, we're looking at changing the standard for this modular design, and we're looking at it for this reason. While these EVs are agnostic, we found another EV that's going to make it more efficient for us to design. So we're looking at that design. And so when we get that heads up from the client, that helps us because as soon as that new standard gets rolled out, now from that point forward, we've got to be very clear. Does that only impact the projects that are being issued after say 50% or 75%? This point forward, or do we need to go back and retroactively change those other drawings and projects? And we've got to get that direction from the owner so it's clear, and make sure that we're implementing the standards that make the most sense for us and for them and for the overall program.
And that's also very important that some of the programs that we've been involved in from the beginning to where we are today, a lot of elements have changed, and that's based on just different unique opportunities at different sites, and the industry itself is ever evolving and improving, and new equipment comes out that may work better or deals with unique situations that can be incorporated into a set of plans. And there's opportunities where you may go back and change something that's already been designed and take a couple additional weeks there to implement this new technology, but it's changing very quickly. And every month there's something new or something new that comes out with this type of technology. But it's all about producing the best product in the field for your needs. Program innovation, QA/QC. We have our own internal QA/QC process. But with our clients, we've also learned that because we have so many different projects going on at the same time, that we also need to provide a breakdown of spreadsheets and any type of revisions that were made to plans, because they're site specific. You may have 5 or 6 or maybe even 20 sites going at a time. A lot of times you got to make sure that when you're talking to a certain project manager on your side, that they have a full understanding of what site is actually being discussed. A lot of the same equipment's used, might be in the same area, but you got to make sure that at least there's a trail of what revisions were made on a set of plans, and it helps to apply additional spreadsheet that breaks down every type of revision that was made to a set of plans, in addition to the QA/QC that happens. And then performing our own self audits. With the number of projects that we have going on at a time, it's good to have an outside set of eyes take a look at our processes, making sure that we're holding to our own standards, and any suggestions where something may come about where we can make an improvement. But that just helps the entire program in itself. Applied learning. This is done weekly briefs, kind of regional get-togethers where we talk about what we've learned, and improvements that we can make, milestones with projects, and closeouts. And the complexities that we had seen this week, new opportunities that have come up. But it's something that we do on a weekly basis. And then asking for client feedback. We discussed that and touched base on that before. Clients always number one. Any feedback that we can receive from client is appreciated and implemented into the program. Design approach. We've talked about this. There are a number of different type of situations we've run into, from underground storage, retention situations, implementing new ideas, new solutions. You have to be nimble and able to have the capabilities of suggesting or trying a new type of solution on site, and having the capabilities to design to those opportunities. Sometimes it's outside. Sometimes EV chargers are located inside. EV chargers inside the facility is a whole nother level of design requirements, from structural to other specific needs that a municipality may have in their review of the building permits. And then owner supplied materials. Again, I already touched base on that. An example is it's critical in this type of development that you are ahead of the curve on the timeline it takes, not only for yourself to get the equipment that you need for your site, but for the utility to get the equipment they need to bring the power to you to energize your EV chargers. And then one of the program innovations is mining opportunities. We've definitely seen a lot of opportunities to work with the client to come up with new solutions and new ideas in this ever evolving EV charger world that we live in right now. Even the amount of power that's supplied by the chargers themselves, or the level of vehicle that's coming on with the capabilities of being charged or put into service. As you know, a lot of the fleet management uses either smaller cars or vans or something to the effect. But semi trucks are coming online too, and that's a whole nother level of power and unique situations and opportunities that are coming. But it's ever changing EV world that we live in. It's definitely more opportunity that's on the horizon, right? That's in effect right now too. It's the size of the vehicle themselves are getting bigger. Did you have anything to add to that, Jika?
Yeah, the only thing I'll add is that a lot of times we think of program innovation or any innovation to be the next sexy thing about like digital twins or something high level like that. But I remember I was on a leadership call talking about innovation, and this particular company was specifically said, while we look for these huge innovations to happen, one of the things we can't lose sight of is the fact that if you can change something to improve the operations or to improve the speed to get to the client, that is considered innovation too. So a lot of what we're talking about here is anything that gives us the gains that we need to make the process better to deliver the project on that side of it, but also on the side of the innovation of the product itself for the client. So I just want to make sure that that's clear, because there's ways to innovate and anybody can do it. And one of the stories that comes to mind is the applied learning. And really, my job as the program director is to, again, work with the client and really mine for feedback to improve ourselves as a team and what we're delivering to our client. I remember one conversation at dinner, I said, there's got to be something we can improve upon. And he goes, you know what, Jake, why don't you work with your team to try to get your presentations crisper and clearer and better? And I'm like, that's a good point. So I took the opportunity to talk to, we have a mentor protege program within our company. And it happened to be, I was mentoring a protege that was on the program at the time. And so I sat down with him and went over with him about, hey, let's get this presentation more systematic. So always start with the project site. Always, next thing should be, where's the power coming in from? Next thing should be, where's the first set of chargers? Secondly, or the next item should be, hey, we're putting the charges here based on direction given to us on this thing. Anyway, the point was, I worked with the script. He developed it. Next presentation, he gave it and knocked it out of the park. And so as soon as he was done, I got a message from the client. Jacob, that's the best presentation we've seen ever. Great job giving us kudos. And that feels good when you're in a mentor protege relationship. You give advice to somebody and then they take that advice, implement it pretty much immediately, and get that kind of result. And so something that made me super proud, something that you can impact just by asking those questions to the client, like how do we improve? Where do we improve? What can we do to serve you better? And I think that's something that we always want to be asking. But I think that's the only thing I have for program innovation. Anything else come to mind, Rich, before we move to the next slide?
Okay.
Sorry. Key takeaways. Again, just to summarize our presentation. If you want to summarize into these 4 items, really want to develop an EV transition plan. Really understand what it's going to take to put EV onto your site. And to do that, you really want to ask questions, talk to folks, come to presentations like this, go to presentations at the trade shows. And our whole presentation, our entire program that we do, we wrote the article, now we're presenting, and the idea is to really get feedback from you to tell us what you want to hear more of. And we want to hear, what should we dig into more? What should we talk about more? What do you want to hear from us in the future? And reach out to us and email us, ask us questions. We know sometimes that we don't get that opportunity here, and that's fine. But really the idea is that we want to help you take the knowledge that we've learned over the last 3 years of implementing EV and make it better for you. So we definitely have scoping meetings with clients and opportunity and partners that just help us understand what your challenge is and what solution should be right for you. So definitely reach out for that. Again, define the program that's right for you, whether it's one parking facility or 20 or 100, doesn't matter. You've got to customize it for yourself. And so ask those questions to yourself we talked about before. Think about what it is you're looking for, your ultimate goal. Are you trying to get revenue out of this? There are places you get revenue. There's new technologies coming out now that are apps that basically identify the car. As you back up the car, it has a camera. You can tell with the car. It automatically connects to the app, and then the charging starts happening as soon as they plug in, because you don't even have to worry about using your credit card. You're also subscribed up, and the handshake happens, and it happens pretty seamlessly. So there's new technology innovation happening with the apps out there when it comes to EV. And again, select equipment partners, whether it's the vehicle itself that you're looking at, or you're just looking for a charger, and the charger is agnostic, or it needs to be able to be a smart charger and do load management, or if it and charge the people that are using it. All that you need to understand. What are you trying to get out of it? Define it, because that will depend which product is right for you. And last here is this: always look for opportunities to innovate. I think that's something that our company believes in. It's something that we believe in. And again, our definition of innovation is not just the big sexy things. While we are doing that, we also want to just make everything that we do better, faster, and provide that great client experience that we want to achieve on every single project. Let's see here. As automotive makers are moving to 40-volt electric architecture, does this impact how you execute projects today, and will this ensure 12-volt architecture remains relevant? Well, again, that's going to depend that's a market question, but it's a great question, Michael. And one of the things that we're always looking at is flexibility. So one of our approaches is having flexible designs, like we talked about. The modular designs are super flexible, and we're able to also add additional conduit and additional space to run new wires if we need to. Most of these chargers are a single circuit, so I don't think it's going to affect it. And but again, it's going to come down to individual requirement of the site itself and what they're trying to accomplish for their product. Next question was, what stage of the project do you find most difficult? That's a great question, Nicole. I think it really depends on the planning work. So there's a reason why Rich is the program manager, and one of the big things that him as a planner, is we have to deal with the local jurisdictions, and we do our site investigation report. We need to define exactly what we have in front of us, and when we do that report, our planners are the ones that identify all the hurdles for us. And so I think the biggest challenge, or which stage of the biggest challenge, is really defining that first phase, because a lot of times we're moving very quickly. So we've got to do a lot of research very fast. And identifying that also not just includes the coordination with the AHJ requirements, but it also includes potential landlords who have their own requirements. And sometimes we don't get the information from them fast enough. So, and if we get starting off on the wrong foot, it just creates a lot of extra work that could be avoided.
I can add to that from the standpoint of working with AHJs or municipalities. A lot of times they don't have anything in the code that deals with EV chargers in itself. So you have to be very clear upfront what you are presenting to do in the field. They like to see pictures, a lot of information, what the chargers are going to look like, what the solution is going to look like. It not that anybody's fault. It's just, this is relatively new technology, how it looks, what's going to be in the field, how it's connected. And then the other portion of it is implementing new revisions to the code doesn't happen overnight. So we're a little bit ahead of the curve, and that element of it's catching up. It's not difficult, but it's something you really need to be upfront with in advance of, because you don't want to get too far down the line and then you go into building permit and someone's like, well, this needs to go through this process to get it approved. Another challenge is, not so much a challenge, but it's making sure that the power that you need for the EV chargers in your communication and coordination with the utility itself is established up front to make sure that they can supply you with the power that you need. And that's key to making sure that your EV chargers go online when you need them to go online. A lot of that might be based on the delivery of your vehicles. Your vehicles are coming in XYZ day. You want to get them in the field as soon as possible. You don't want them sitting around. So making sure that the utility has the ability to supply you the power that you need and that it's actually connected in the field is one of the bigger challenges that I see, that making sure that coordination is set up and clean up front and have an understanding of everybody's goal.
Next question is CFI grant funding. Is it now available for paid parking facilities? I know that grant funding is available now during the round two portion of it. Specific to CFI, I'd have to leverage our expert, Mark Rimmer, who actually runs our internal EV team, and I will confirm that. I believe it is, but I will confirm that and get back with you. It's anonymous, so I guess I will have to figure that out, Dan, and how we get that answer to him. But yeah, I will add to that, because of the apps changing, there have been creative ways that I've seen. And when I first put an EV in New York in 2010, they couldn't charge for parking. What I'm being told now is that there's two ways that I've heard that you can charge for it. And this is different than CFI grant funding, but I'm just telling you there are different ways around it. But the point is that they implement the charging cost into the overall cost of parking, or they pay for the subscription to the app, and the app is just giving you access to parking and you're paying the app. So there are ways around that. So I would imagine that there's a creative way around this as well, but we'd have to definitely look at the rules and regulations and understand that. All right. Next question. What brands of EV chargers are most supportive of general interoperability and envision future standards? Again, I think that these chargers can be very much agnostic, especially for fleets depend upon the vehicle themselves being the brains. And so when we look at a digital twin and developing a digital twin for an entire facility, that management, the whole charge management and the deployment of the energy is going to be managed and through the vehicle itself. So that charger is fully like a dummy charger. Doesn't need to have connectivity from a wireless perspective to communicate because it's not taking payment and it's not required to do the load management that's required in some facilities. So if it's a very agnostic charger and it's not required, it pretty much can just provide the power to the vehicle as long as the head itself is correct and the load itself is correct. So, and again, it depends on your specific program and what's coming in the future. We'd have to do more research. Rich, I don't know if you have any answer for that one from your perspective.
What we've seen one specific type of charger in the field or for fleet management? I'm sorry, was it fleet directive or just in general?
I usually asking brands, but basically, we saw ChargePoint have a huge chunk of the market. It's kind of been changing as time goes by, but for the fleets that we're working on, they use 2 or 3 of them, but because they're agnostic, it doesn't really matter, right? The flexibility doesn't matter because of the program itself is the point.
It's a good point right there. There's some of the folks that we work with. You don't want to get aligned with a particular charger in itself just for the sheer fact of availability. You want to be able to have the ability to switch who your supplier is and work to those requirements of that particular charger in your program itself. If you get tied to, personally, I think if you get tied to a particular type of charger, and when it's not available, you may have to make changes down the line that will cause delays. So you want to have the ability to at least have 2 or 3 available charger types that you want to work with and somebody that you've identified as or work with your program.
If there's any other questions that come up later, please reach out to us. I think that we'll send our information, but there's our phone numbers as well as our email addresses. If you have a follow-up question or need more details to a question, we certainly, if we can't answer it, we have the expertise in-house that will get the answer to you. So I'm not worried about that at all. And if you want to collaborate on something specific and just talk in general, please reach out to us. We're open to have those conversations. And thanks for spending an hour with us, and we appreciate your time.
Yes, thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Have a good rest of your afternoon.